She said the word as if it left a bad taste in her mouth. "I have a friend who is a detective," Sarah said, keeping her voice neutral and calm. She didn't want to seem too anxious or make Mrs. Linton feel she was being pressured to do something against her will. "I can assure you he'll be discreet. He'll also be kind and considerate of Grace." Mrs. Linton looked as if she might weep. "It doesn't matter how kind he might be. There's no way to question her about this without upsetting her." "I don't want to upset Grace either," Sarah assured her, "but think about the man who did this. He could do it to another innocent girl, maybe more than one. Even if the police could find the man, Grace could never testify in court," Mrs. Linton said. "We would never permit it." Sarah didn't point out that no court would accept testimony from someone like Grace either. "There are other ways to punish a man like that," Sarah said, "and simply identifying him would help. People could spread the word that he was dangerous and not to be trusted around females. No one need ever know Grace was a victim." "Gossip is an ugly thing," Mrs. Linton said, picking at an invisible piece of lint on her skirt. Sarah wasn't sure exactly what she meant. Gossip could also hurt Grace, so she waited, giving the other woman time to consider the possibilities. "I'll have to ask Mr. Linton," she finally said, "but I can't imagine he'd agree to anything involving the police." "Perhaps you could ask him just to meet with Detective Sergeant Malloy. The two men might be able to come up with an idea for identifying this man and stopping him at least, even if he can't be arrested and prosecuted." Mrs. Linton's face twisted in pain. "Please don't think I don't want this man caught, Mrs. Brandt. I'd like to see him pinched over the side of the Brooklyn Bridge or thrown beneath the wheels of a speeding locomotive. I'd like him to suffer for what he did to my baby girl, and I'd certainly like to stop him from ever hurting another girl. But you must understand, I can't see Grace hurt any more in the process." "I understand completely. If you decide not to investigate, Mr. Malloy will respect your wishes." "I'll have to ask my husband," she repeated, "but I can't imagine he'll agree." Frank had been waiting almost an hour, but he'd wait all day to see Dr. David Newton. Dr. Newton had operated on Brian's club foot, and he was the only doctor Frank trusted. They'd told him he'd have to wait until Dr. Newton was finished seeing patients for the day before he'd have time for Frank, and so he sat. Finally, a nurse escorted him into the doctor's office. Newton rose from the chair behind his desk and put out his hand to greet him. "Mr. Malloy, good to see you," he said with obvious sincerity. "How's Brian doing?" "He's wearing out a pair of shoes a week from walking so much," Frank reported proudly, shaking the doctor's hand. "I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you did for him." "I was happy to be able to help. And not all my operations turn out so well," he said modestly. "What can I do for you? My nurse said you needed some information for a case you're working on." Newton motioned to a chair, and Frank sat down as the doctor took his seat behind his desk again. "I came across a medical condition in some women, something I never heard of, and I was wondering if you could tell me anything about it." "What kind of condition?" Frank pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. On it, he'd written the words used to describe the medical histories of the women involved. He handed it to Dr. Newton, not trusting his ability to pronounce the foreign words correctly. Dr. Newton looked at the paper for a moment. "Dementia praecox is a tragic form of insanity that strikes otherwise healthy, normal young adults for no known reason. Some of them must be institutionalized because they are dangerous to themselves or others." "Are they all violent?" "Oh no, only a few. But all of them are completely out of touch with reality. They hear voices or imagine all sorts of things that aren't true." "Could a woman with this kind of insanity be kept at home, by her family?" "I'm sure it happens often, if the patient isn't violent, as I said. No one with the means to keep them would put a loved one into an asylum unless it was absolutely necessary." Frank considered this a long moment. "What about hysteria? What does that mean?" "It can mean almost anything," Dr. Newton smiled sadly. "Sometimes it just means the doctor has no idea what's really wrong with the woman, so he calls it hysteria." "Are the dementia and the hysteria the same thing?" "I'm not sure. That isn't my area of study, but the symptoms can be similar, so they may be confused. Maybe the conditions even overlap sometimes. As I said, I don't know that much about insanity." All these women